Mr. Larson, that's a great idea. So, Mr. Arrington.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Commissioner, thanks for being here. Couple things. One, I'd like to have a conversation, we don't have to do it now, with your team responsible for the Donor Advisory Fund regulations. I want to understand them better. They may be right, they may not be. I have concerns about what y'all would think are conflicts of interest that I think the market has already considered and already manages, if you will. So it's something I'd like to...
have my commitment on that.
Thank you. So I'm sure you have been briefed about the question I have, which is the question I asked you a year ago. You got a lot to keep up with. You did respond in a letter. I referenced in our conversation a New York Post article that talked about the number of firearms and munitions that you all have at the IRS and the number of armed agents. And it went through specific numbers: 3,832 handguns, 600 shotguns, 439 rifles, 15 fully automatic weapons. So it's very detailed. I don't know where they got their information. And I think an appropriate oversight role for us is to, as a check and balance, and for the purpose of transparency to the taxpayers and to the people that we report to in the people's house, that they ought to have some confirmation of whether or not those numbers are right or if they're different. You responded with a letter and said, the inventory of guns and ammunition is consistent with other law enforcement agencies. I find that an inadequate response. I think if the American people, who we all work for, ask as a check and as a point of accountability on agencies with tremendous power, and with tremendous power comes, I think, great responsibility and oversight and accountability, they deserve a specific answer. What's in the inventory? How many armed IRS agents? I'm not suggesting that there might not be some level of appropriateness, but just saying we keep up with the same standards of who? The FBI? The ATF? The Border Patrol? So I'm going to ask you again, do you have the specifics of firearms, the number of armed IRS agents, and the inventory of munitions? I think the American people ought to know that. And then we can discuss why you have it and why they exist and for what purpose. And again, there may be an appropriate need.
Yeah, I would love to answer this question. First of all, I do recall the letter. I believe the letter that we sent you had a link to a public report that has the information you requested. If it did not, then we will get you that public link. I added the point that it was consistent with other law enforcement after providing the data. If I could, though, I think it's so important, if you could allow me to just address some myths about IRS and guns. First, the vast majority of IRS employees are unarmed and will never be armed. Most IRS employees are customer service reps. I like to say they're armed only with headsets, phone headsets, and most of our accountants all of our accountants armed only with calculators.
50% of them are home doing it instead of in their offices, but that's a different issue.
Second, the only people in the IRS that would ever be armed are federal law enforcement officials who investigate crimes in the context of very dangerous scenarios: organized crimes, criminals operating on the dark web, narcotics trafficking, human trafficking, terror financing, money laundering. The idea of sending these law enforcement officials to go execute a search warrant or an arrest warrant without being armed along with their other law enforcement colleagues is not something that would ever be a smart or prudent thing to do. Third, and this is about our inventory, I think it's important context, the actual discharge of any weapon by an IRS law enforcement official is extremely rare. But under federal regulations, we are required to maintain a minimum amount of ammunition for training purposes in order for them to be able to hold a firearm when they're executing a search warrant on a dangerous criminal. And so when you see the ammunition numbers in that public site, don't assume that that is ammunition that is used by the IRS ever. It's really
I
just
got
for
5
training.
seconds left.
Yep.
I appreciate all that. I'll look at that link.
Please.
If it's in there, then I may have missed it.
Yep.
If it's not in there,
I will get you the data.
you'll get me the specifics so we can
Absolutely.
share with the American
Yep.
people, so we can, okay. That's good. That's all I need. Appreciate it.
Thank you.